Hello everyone, Andrew Bosey here with Optics Binding. Just wanted to make a quick video showing the restoration process of the newest Optics Press book. As you can see, the newest book is focused on collecting the BOMARC Service News, which was Boeing's in-house newsletter for their pilotless aircraft division in the late 50s, early 60s. The main drive in making this book is the writing that Thomas Pynchon did for the publication when he worked at Boeing during that time period. But coming in a close second for me is preserving the incredible mid-century graphic design that each issue entails. There's over 40 issues, each averaging 16 to 20 pages an issue, and each issue being printed in two colors with black and an accent color. As you can see here, like this is the pink issue, so you got black for the text and then pink for the accent color. This third color, this lighter pink, is actually the same color pink here, just with a 50% diffusion screen on it, which was a very popular technique back in the day, and still is in offset printing for maximizing the colors you can get with just a single color. But then you also have like blue issues, green issues. You have pages where the image or the illustration has a color hue over it. You have pages where the photos are black and white, but the text is in color. You have pages where the text is white and black, and then you also have black illustrations. You get graphs with color shapes. And then most often you get some combination. So this is going to be the page that I used today for the restoration demo. The goal of the restoration is to make it seem, when you're reading the book, like you're looking at a freshly printed page and not a photograph of one. And there's a couple steps to get that. First of all, the one thing you want to remove is any physical defects to the page that would give it away as a photo or a scan. And right off the bat, you can see there's 3 hole punch holes here. So those will need to get digitally removed, as well as the paper texture and color. I will be printing this on actual paper, which has its own color and texture. So I won't need this. I need to get rid of that, as well as any dirt, smudges, hairs, stuff like that. Here's the edge of the page from the scan. All of that can get cleaned up digitally. The other thing is the color. So like I mentioned, here with this beautiful solid color, because the color is pure and not created in a 4-color printing process, the result is incredibly vibrant and just looks amazing in person on the printed page. But capturing that vibrancy can be a little challenging. And that's because that vibrancy is created from how the ink absorbs into the paper, followed by how light then reflects off the ink. So if you're expecting the same results with the same color by printing digitally with toner, you're going to be severely let down. And that's because digital printing is extremely unforgiving. What you send to the printer is what's going to be printed. So if you're hoping for a happy accident where the color looks vibrant or it smooths out because of some bleeding, it's not going to happen. If you want a vibrant color that matches the originals, you have to get creative. And what I mean by that, and what I did, is I created endless texture patterns instead of using solid colors. And what that means, if we actually zoom in to this color here, you can see that it's not a solid color. All these little squares are variations on the pink hue that when viewed from a distance creates a solid color. So what I've done is I've created some textured patterns that are on an endless loop, so they don't have any seams if we fill in an area or use a paintbrush, that will have all these little variations in hue. What that helps with is consistency. These pages and these issues, that they're 60 years old. They've gone through a lot, whether it's just natural deterioration, weather, like humidity levels, all of that. Like the white on the pages is different for each page of these issues. And that's just because of how things have aged and their handling. So a myriad of different factors go into changing that. What we want to make sure is when I'm printing this new one, is that those colors are same throughout the entire book. So by creating these patterns, I know that this pink is going to have the same vibrant look throughout every time I use it, and there's not going to be any variation, but it's not going to be sterile the way it would be if you just printed it as a solid color digitally. And what I've found is to maintain that consistency of color throughout the book, that the best course of action is to completely redo the page layouts as if we're creating them for first time printing back in the 50s. So let's jump right into that. So here we have this page here with an unedited scan on one layer and then a background layer on the other. Now for the background layer, instead of a pure white, I filled it in with kind of an eggshell white, which will help you see some of the techniques that I'm using more clearly. So the first step that we want to do is we want to duplicate layer 1, because we won't want to make any changes to the original scan. We just always want to have that there as its pure thing. We're not going to be using any layer masks for this restoration. All the colors are going to be on their own individual layer, which I'll explain why later. But the first step that we want to do is we want to create a layer that's just the blacks, specifically the blacks that have a white background. So what we're talking about with that is all this text here, the title text, the body text, this description text, the bottom here, not this, even though this is black, this is a pink background instead of a white background. So that's going to be a separate layer. And not this, because this is an image and not text. And that'll be also its own thing. So the first step, having the black text be its own layer, is converting this layer to black and white. You can do that just by going to Image, Adjustments, Black and White. Now once we're in here, what we want to do is make this text as black as possible and the white background as white as possible. When you're using the black and white tool, you can actually use these color bands to help with that. You can see when you move them back and forth, there is changes to how the black and white is affected. For this, the main band that we're going to mess around with is just the yellow, because that's usually what the paper color is going to be on. And if we just move this up a little bit, you can see it lighten just a tad. Go up all the way, you get all this grain, and we don't want that. It's always a smart move in Photoshop when making changes or any adjustments to make small adjustments. Any major adjustment like this is just going to end up in trouble. Just take a step back, make another small adjustment, take a step back, make another small adjustment. That's the way to go in Photoshop. So we're going to do that. Next, we want to go to the Curves tool. Now this will help us get rid of that paper texture completely. So if I zoom back in here and pull up the curves, we're talking about all of this noisy gray area. That's all going to be in this section here. So if we pull this over, you can see it start to magically disappear. Of course, if you keep going all the way over, then the text will disappear. So you want to make sure that you're adjusting it just to the point where the background paper and any smudgy details, things get erased. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, we want to pump up the blacks to get rid of any of the grays that are in the lettering, but not so much that it blows out the blacks and thickens the line weight around each letter. So right about there. Okay. Now once we've done this, now we want to remove the white. To do that, go up to Select, Color Range. I'm going to select the white background. Make sure the fuzziness is maxed out at 200. Hit OK. And then delete. Now if we scroll in and toggle on the original scan, you're going to see that the lettering is a little thin compared to the originals. And that's because we have actually, when we deleted the white, we've also deleted some of the light grays around it. Because if we zoom way in to the original scan, we can see that the letters aren't solid black either. You got a good black in the center of the letters, but that's surrounded by light grays in here. And if we toggle off the scan, we can see that our new letters is missing that. Like so right here, there's a very light gray that's no longer there. So we want to add that back. And to do that, we're going to duplicate this layer. Go back to the bottom layer. Go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're going to add a very small blur to this, and it's actually going to sharpen it. So even though it sounds counterproductive, this works. And we're doing a very, very small blur. We're talking 0.3, 0.4 pixels. So okay on that. And then the layer that we duplicated, I'm going to double click that, go to Color Overlay, add a solid black with an opacity of 100. We're going to merge those two layers, call them black. And now we have text that is very sharp and very easy to read, and it's going to print great. Great. Okay, so that's the black text area. We turn back on the original scan. Let's move to this area here. So for this, we're going to recreate this. And what I mean by that is this rectangular color shape we're going to make on its own layer. And then we're going to extract this black line work and put that on its own layer. So let's start with the shape. If you go to the rectangular marquee tool and highlight this guy, one thing you'll notice is it's not lining up. So it lines up here, lines up here, lines up here, but down here, it doesn't line up because there's an angle. And that's because this screen or this color shape, when they were doing the layout, was cut out by hand in the late 50s. Which means there's always going to be some chance of human error or not having it be perfect. And one of the things about this restoration, if I were to go in here and make a perfect rectangle in Photoshop, use a solid color to fill it in, it's going to be extremely sterile and have no life to it when we print it. Where the original issues, they have a vibe to them. And it's important that I try to capture that. And a lot of that is by understanding how the originals were actually made. And when I'm doing any type of restoration technique, that I'm not doing something that would look out of place or out of time for, the late 50s for a newsletter being made at Boeing. So it's very essential to preserve little things like that. So to avoid that in this situation, instead of using the marquee tool, I use the polygon lasso tool. And then just follow along the edges to preserve any of those human inconsistencies that might arise. So once that's selected, we're going to create a new layer. Select the paint bucket tool. Make sure you're on pattern instead of foreground. And then we can select whatever color pattern we're using. So we're going to go with the one here. And then we can fill that in. So you can see now over in layer 2, there's that pink rectangle. We're going to call this one pink. While this is still selected, if we go to the black layer, we can delete whatever's underneath it. And then if we go to the original scan, we can copy and paste that layer. So we can turn off that original scan. So now we have the copy and pasted layer that we're going to extract the black from. And underneath that, we have the pink rectangle that we created using our endless texture patterns. So if we go back up to layer 2, to extract the black from the pink, it's the same process as extracting the black from the white with one slight variation. So first off, convert to black and white. And then here, where last we adjusted the yellow band to account for the paper, this one we're going to adjust the red band. Because even though this is gray here, we know that it's actually pink. And that so it's going to be on this spectrum. So if we grab that and pull it to the right, you can see that pink disappear. Of course, if you go all the way to the right, you start damaging the line quality of the text and the image, and that we don't want. So you want to find that happy medium between the background going away and the text still retaining its integrity. So, okay. Up to image, adjustments, curves. Get that white completely out of there. Same thing with the blacks. You know, bump this up to the point where it's not overblown like that, but is filling up like in this area here where you can see those white dots over here, and then you fill it, and then perfect. Okay. Then we're going to delete the white. So select color range, white, and delete. Now, you can see just like the text issue that we had before we added the Gaussian blur and the color overlay, this line quality is a little thin and anemic. So it's the same process. Duplicate layer. Add a Gaussian blur to the bottom layer. Add a color overlay to the top. Merge the two. We'll call this BOC, which stands for black over color. Keep in mind, all these steps I just did can easily be turned into actions, which I definitely use. It makes the process so much faster. Just for the sake of this video, it's easier to explain it by doing it the long way. So now that we're back up here, one of the things too, if we go back to that black layer, this is where, because there's nothing on this layer except black, if we remove the background, you can see there's no white, which makes it really easy now to go in with your eraser and clean up these 3 hole punches just by erasing them. I also like to hit the edges just to make sure any artifacts from the scanning process are all cleaned up. If we go over to this new layer 2 that we just created, make sure everything looks good here. This is something where we can go in and clean up just a little bit if necessary, like this little guy there. And if I'm feeling especially anal, stuff like this, where even in the original there was some problems with the text. If I wanted to clean that up, I could go in there with a brush and just fill those in just a little bit. Nothing too extreme. It also makes it really easy for future adjustments. Because I have everything on separate layers, so a pink layer, black over color layer. Once I have the entire book done and I do a test print and I need to make an adjustment on one of those layers, I can easily write an action and then send the entire book through that action, and I have to go in there and individually adjust things. I could change a whole color if I wanted to, just by having them on separate layers and properly organized and labeled. So that's the reason I do that. Next step, we want to make a layer for the red. So the red in this page is the T here, as well as this illustration here. So I'm going to select layer 1, the original scan, choose our lasso tool, and then go on and select those red images. So we got the T, and then this illustration here. Once those are selected, go ahead and select the black layer and then delete that section, the selected section, because we don't need the T and this in black and in red. We just need it in red. So go there, go back to select the original scan, and then copy and paste into a new layer. So now this illustration and the T are on their own layer. And from here, we do a very similar process that we've been doing with one major change. So we're going to turn this into black and white. And here, instead of turning the red into white, like we did with the pink box, we're going to turn this red into solid black. So if we pull this over, you can see that. And yet again, if you pull it all the way over, you can see how much the blacks blow out and how you lose all the finer detail. There's a ton of really fine cross-hatching here, some thin lines, and you really want to make sure that all of that gets preserved. So probably right around there. That's good. We'll bump up the yellows just a tad to help with getting rid of that paper texture. And then you go into the curves tool, knock out the paper completely, bump up the blacks just a tad. We really don't want to lose any of that fine detail in there. And then we want to delete the white. So select color range, white, delete. Great. So now this layer that has the T and this illustration in solid black. And if we double click on that and go into pattern overlay, we can now choose any of those pattern textures that I've created to cover that up with. So we're going to choose the appropriate color, which is this one here. Make sure that the opacity is set to 100, and OK. And right there, now our T and this image are in our textured pattern red. Last but not least, this black and white image here. So even though it's black and white, just like the text was, we maxed this out so much that it blew out all the details of this. So we're going to want to do this on a separate layer than the text, just to preserve those details. You can see if I toggle that back on, how much we lost. So if we select the layer one and go up here, get our lasso tool again, and then select the image. Yet again, go to the black layer, delete, go back to layer 1, copy and paste. So now this image is on its own layer. Turn that off. And now we want to make this black and white. So even though it looks like it's a black and white image already, it's still a color scan. And so we want to turn that into black and white. We don't need to adjust any of the colors for this one, so just hit OK. But you can see now why I had the eggshell color in the background, because this is the white that we want to delete. We want this background image to show through, to be the white of this image. So we only want the blacks from here. So select, make sure that your pure white is selected. That's zeros all the way down on the CMYK scale. Select color range. Make sure fuzziness is up to 200. OK. And then delete. And now you can see that the eggshell background is coming through this image. And any of the small details that we lost in the image, like we would with the text that we needed to use the Gaussian blur and the color overlay for, we now can make up by double clicking, going to color overlay, solid black, and then bringing that down to about 25%. And voila, there's the fully edited page. You can toggle the original on and off. And this is what the OpticXpress restoration looks like for the BOMARC Service News. The book is going to be over 700 pages in total. I've restored about half of those at this moment. The goal is to have all 700 plus pages fully restored before the end of the year. So I should get back to doing that. Thanks for watching this video, and I cannot wait to show everyone the finished book.